Hello, everyone, and welcome to Variety Streaming Room. I'm Clayton Davis, Film Awards Editor here at Variety. Thank you for joining us today. After the screening of The Mauritanian with the cast and the director, I'm joined here by Kevin Macdonald, director of The Mauritanian, along with stars Jodie Foster, Benedict Cumberbatch, Shailene Woodley, and Tahar Rahim. How is everyone doing today?
Good, thanks, Clayton.
Excellent. Could be better.
Good and bad, like everyone, I think. Good and bad.
B minus.
Extremes. B minus. Variable. My report would definitely say variable.
When's the last time you guys have been together, like in a room or just at all? Like when did everything finish wrapping up? Wrap on the shoot.
Well, we wrapped a shoot back in, I think it was the very beginning of end of February, beginning of March. We shot for a week in Mauritania, which was Tahar was the only one of the actors who came there, and then I haven't seen anyone since because everything's been done remotely. I mean, I think Benedict and I live around the corner from each other, and we had a cup of coffee kind of remotely one day. And other than that, I haven't seen anybody in the flesh, I don't think.
Oh, me and Jodie Foster didn't get invited to that. I don't think Shailene Woodley did either. That's weird.
Listen, move into the neighborhood and you can all come sort of at a socially distanced round. That would be fine.
So I see. So Kevin Macdonald takes Benedict out for coffee and goes out with Tahar the Mauritanian.
I think I took Kevin out for coffee. Let's just be, I'd like to also that technicality. It's important to note these things, especially when you're dealing with a Scot. I did buy the coffee.
Amazing.
No, it's lovely to see you. And it's strange. I never met Shailene or Rahim. I've never met either of them, and I didn't meet them obviously on the film. My character doesn't work with either of them. I last saw and worked with Jodie over a year ago. And yeah, Kevin, we just had coffee a couple of months ago, I guess.
Well, I guess this is a good place to start. I guess to start with Kevin, you can answer this. You're directing a cast that, they are not together. They're an ensemble, but they're not an ensemble playing off one another because they're either in pairs or alone a lot. How did you have that speak to one another in terms of the editing room, the process, and getting that story to make it feel as organic as possible?
Well, it was pretty useful actually in a way that, the various stories, there were basically 3 different stories in the film, and we did shoot them pretty much separate to each other. Obviously, Benedict and Jodie have 2 scenes together, and they were in Cape Town, which was where we shot most of the film. They crossed over for a week or so, and other than that, it was around everybody's schedule, and we ended the film by shooting in Mauritania, and prior to that, we'd shot the kind of interrogation sequences, the big interrogation sequence, which took about a week with Tahar. So that was kind of what we were building up to, and that was really the challenge of this whole movie, both in the script and in the editing, was how do you take these disparate stories and weave them together in a way that is compelling and where you want to know what happens next, and where you don't feel like, oh, these are 3 completely disconnected stories. Obviously, I had a great advantage of that Shailene and Jodie, who form a great pairing, that they are together. So that was something to hold on to in the edit, their relationship going through the movie.
Awesome. Jodie, you've had a very illustrious, beautiful career that we have followed and loved for so long. Talk about preparing for this role in comparison to your other roles, especially in portraying Nancy Hollander. Did you speak with her? Did you have any meetings with her? How did you get into that character?
Yeah, I was so lucky. I was able to meet up with Nancy a couple of times before we started shooting. And then she came to Cape Town as well when Mohammed, the 2 of them came together to Cape Town while we were shooting. So that was fun. I've never played an actual character or actual person.
You did say to me that you played the Anna in Anna and the King.
I did, but she was long dead and she was a liar. So that was easy.
Not really a real person.
You could lie about her and it didn't really matter. But with Nancy, you do feel that responsibility to make sure that you honor not just who she is, but her mission. And in this case, I didn't really honor who she was because she's a very nice person and my character is rude. That was sort of a choice that I felt worked well for the movie. And Nancy was okay with it. She seems to have a good sense of humor about it. She's actually a lovely person. And
but I think the clue to that was actually in when I met Mohammed and I taped some recordings with him. He did talk about how Nancy was. He called her the alpha dog, and she was tough. She's tough. She doesn't care about anything but the case. And I think there's a side to her that's like that. I mean, she's a lovely person when we meet her, but I think when she's working, there is this other side. And I think maybe you took hold of that.
Yeah, well, she's very steely, and she talks very softly, and she barely moves. And she sort of exerts her power in that way, which I think is very interesting. I as I said to her, this is not going to be an imitation. I'm not very good at doing imitations. But I just, I think what was really nice was really having, I felt in some ways that our character, Shailene, and my character were one. It's sort of like we're working together. And so much of the little details of our little micro relationship, about the tension between us, I found very interesting, and then I thought was very helpful to Mohammed's story. So I feel like I focused on that more, was just the dynamic between Shailene and Nancy.
Awesome. Sahar, talk about, meeting Mohammed and, just getting into a headspace that obviously is very difficult. And I know that you said this publicly before, that he holds no grudges. Like, he's just such a lovely person, like something that I could never do. Can you talk a little bit about channeling that energy?
Yeah, me neither. I couldn't do it, I guess. but it's too. But yeah, Mohammed is such an incredible person. When you first meet him, you get struck by his light, the way he could joke with you, especially when you know what he's been through. It's almost impossible to conceive. But we met virtually. And as Jody said, they flew to South Africa. And we just bumped into each other in front of the hotel when I was heading to the shooting. And I felt like he was almost part of the family, or a good friend of mine that I haven't seen for years. And he was like, just, hey man, how are you? And still I was struck. But what impresses me the most with Mohammed is his ability to just transform anger into forgiveness. Really.
So when you're channeling that forgiveness aspect, I mean, obviously we get into a lot of the big scenes at Guantanamo Bay. In preparation for those scenes, I believe you asked to be put in shackles. You wanted to feel exactly what he went through. You talk about that.
Yeah, I needed it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible for me to just act properly. And as you know, Kevin did a lot of documentaries, so he knows exactly what it is to be true, to catch a real emotion. So he can't fake. So I needed some realistic conditions back for him as well, and just so I can have a taste of what it is. So yeah, there was the shackles. I asked Kevin to turn down to make the cell as cold as possible, so I can be helped in a way. And yeah, it was tough, because how could I possibly know what it is to be tortured like this? Yeah. And I don't think I have the ability to create something out of nowhere. I need to, maybe I'm a bit, but I need to sense it.
Got it. Benedict, so you're playing Lieutenant Colonel Stewart Couch, someone who's very conflicted in the feelings of how he's pursuing this case. Talk about your preparation for this role, and who did you speak to? I'm sure there were a lot of things you couldn't get access to because government and stuff, but can you share a little bit about that?
No, for sure. But I had access to all I needed in meeting Stewart himself, and he was amenable, gentlemanly, courteous, incredibly helpful and honest about that whole extraordinary journey and emotional volte-face from wanting blood and then being brought to a realization that everything that he founds his belief on, from the law to the military to Christianity, and not necessarily in that order, was being undone by the actions at Guantanamo, and he couldn't with any conviction square his conscience. And so he stepped away. He did that extraordinary thing of giving up the case. And I was attracted to the role because of that journey. I mean, it's just a wonderful sort of thing to graph and to chart. And as far as preparation, I looked into a lot of what it is to be a Marine. I didn't go to boot camp. You might be surprised to hear. I didn't have the time. But I researched the book. I read about what was happening to the law at that time. I talked to Stewart himself, and he was, like I said, very forthcoming and informative with as what he's allowed to say about that time and his experience of it. But I think, for me, the most important thing is to sort of touch base with the emotional journey of a character. And, when you have someone like Kevin at the helm, not to put all the pressure on his shoulders, but they're pretty broad when it comes to veracity and truth and investigative thoroughness and accuracy. So I didn't have to become a scholar on the subject. I just had to understand what it was to be that person in that position in that time.
Awesome. Shailene, in many ways, you are almost a consciousness of the audience, the viewer, because you're having these very conflicting conversations with Nancy Hollander about, maybe he did do it, that doubt, everything that we're feeling during that time in our nation's history. Playing Terry Duncan, can you talk about getting prepared for that and how you approach that portrayal?
Yeah, so Terry is a combination of two different lawyers who worked on the case. And so the story that we depict in the film isn't necessarily the true story of Terry Duncan, but it's an amalgamation of different people's storylines. And it felt really important to me, and I know to the film, to depict someone whose emotions take over her ability to stay neutral in a situation. And I think when we look at fear, it's easy to look at it from a very mental based place. But I think for her, she had a deep emotional fear, a fear of isolation, a fear of feeling neglected, a fear of being kicked out of society in a way, because what she wants to do is right. But then she gets in her head about, are the decisions she's making is right? What does right and wrong even mean? What are the implications of this for my personal life and this man's life and my partner's life? So it felt really, I think, having that emotional bond with Tahar, with Mohammed's character that Terry had, and really leaning into the emotions in the room, where what Jodie could lean more into like the intellectual aspect of it, and the need to get information and do something with that information felt like the heart and soul of what was the heartbeat of what was going to help this case come to its fruition. Because at the end of the day, we all just want to emotionally connect and understand one another. And I think for Terry, she did let her emotions get in the way of her ability to be a removed and detached lawyer. But at the same time, those emotions is what also, I think, let her see the heart and soul of who this man was and bring that to her team back home.
Awesome. Kevin, I have a question for you. And I think, I don't know if this was just because it's the script. Was there ever any decision or discussion, because where the movie ends obviously is with Mohammed, winning his first case. And then there's a lot of years that go on after that. Decision to end the movie there and not go through some of those other things that I'm sure would have been very, litigated and very lawyer stuff. But
there could have been the TV show. We could have done the 6-hour version. But I think the big challenge actually in doing the adaptation was it's a story that takes place over so many years, because you haven't just got the 14 years he spent in Guantanamo. You've also got some of the time before that, which you need to understand. He left Mauritania as a kid, the first person in his family to go to university. He gets a scholarship to Germany. He joins up with Al Qaeda unknowingly, unwittingly. When he goes to Afghanistan, he's then harassed by the German police. Blah, 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 blah. You need to know a lot about him. And so, yes, we could have done something a bit like Carlos, that great TV show that the French director, whose name evades me at the moment, did. we were always trying to figure out with the adaptation, where is the absolute focus of this? And once we'd realized that the relationships with the lawyers were what was at the heart of the story that we wanted to tell, we pincered in on those couple of years, really, the sort of what in reality was like 2003 to 2005, 6, and had to do this kind of this device at the end where we sort of jump forward to his release. But I think dramatically that works surprisingly well, actually. It's a bit of a shock to the audience because, you see him when the audience, I think, are so invested by that stage in him and in the case. And, it's a gut punch to see when the card comes up and says he was imprisoned again, or he was not released at that point, spent another 7 years in prison. So we could have focused on many different aspects of the story, but this is the one that I think went to the themes that I was most interested in about the importance of the rule of law. And I suppose that was really the kind of intellectual theme that I had at the back of my mind.
Yeah. This question is this is for everyone, and it's a follow-up to what I asked Shailene Woodley earlier. So as the movie unfolds, we all get a sense, and I think it's pretty definitive, that Mohammed did not do what he's accused of doing. However, Jodie Foster's character has a very, very poignant speech about it's not about whether he did it or not. It's about the rule of law and how this ties to that. Do you think that the movie presents itself to the world as a definitive answer to Mohammed's innocence or not? Or is it really about the rule of law? I guess, which way do you think the movie?
I don't think it's about that. I think he is innocent. I'm, as close to being 100% sure as you can be about anything. And as you speak to Nancy Hollander, she'll say to you, look, the American government spent probably $30-40 million investigating this. They tortured him, and they questioned him for 14 years. If they didn't come up with any evidence in that time, I suspect there is no evidence out there. So I think we can say that he's innocent, but it's not really about that. It's about, should people be treated like this, and about understanding the other. And, the Muslim man accused of terror is probably the least loved person in the world and the least understood person. And I think for me, it was that, like Shailene was saying, it's that emotional connection. And Tahar does such a beautiful job of bringing us in a non-sentimental way into understanding the full humanity of this man. So it's a film about humanity and about why are we doing this to other human beings? What possible excuse can there be? And it's kind of beyond his innocence or his guilt.
I'd echo the same thing. I mean, when I first came to the book before we produced it as a production company, myself and Anna Macklin, and what really threw me in was this. It was a journey about humanity and about resilience and about some kind of extraordinary superhuman ability, like Tahir touched on, of being able to transform fear, repression, danger, and anger into love, understanding, and forgiveness. And it's not a document of fact. It is definitely a document of a human struggle and of the players involved in that human struggle to justify their actions. And that there is a strong argument for why that happened. It is driven by an incredibly strong emotion that swept across all governmental forces involved in any kind of investigation or arrests or mishandling of those they arrested. Post 9/11, there was a nation in fear of another attack, fearing that there was literally a ticking bomb in a real sense, that there was another plot on the horizon. So even that has to be part of the equation. It's a real examination of how we respond to the most extreme situations. And our hero is someone who manages to respond to the most extreme situations by maintaining his humanity. And I think, considering all that's going on in the world, it still has a burning relevance. This is about endurance and tolerance and bravery and humanity. And that's what I'd add.
Did you ever ask Lieutenant Colonel Stewart if he believed that Mohammed was innocent?
I can't remember, so I don't want to say, but
well, yes,
I
we
honestly
did.
can't remember. That's not a dodge, but I didn't. I can't remember
I
that
did.
conversation
I
if I
did.
did not.
The line the line which Jodie, in the scene with Jodie and Benedict share in the bar at the end, where he says, "If Judge Roberts, finds him innocent, then that's good enough for me. But if any evidence comes up, I'll stick the needle in his arm myself." That line is absolute. That's a couch. That's clearly cut from his words, and that's how he feels. And so he believes that he is innocent because no evidence came up to suggest otherwise, and he's
and none that was extracted by legal means or Christian means or humane means.
Absolutely, and I think that you can't underestimate the heroism of Couch standing up against you sort of united front of the military legal service to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to prosecute this. This is built on such falsehood and inhumanity. I'm not going to prosecute this case. And I think it's really remarkable that this is not a story of about kind of partisan politics. Trump is very definite a Republican. They're definitely a Republican, a Christian Republican. Nancy is like a dyed-in-the-wool progressive liberal, and they are friends now.
Did you still call Couch Trump? Did I just imagine that?
He did.
Sorry.
Sorry, technical correction. I didn't play Donald Trump.
Whoops.
That one might be
Anyway,
right.
but I think
Something about the hair.
We can edit that out.
Yeah, it's too soon. Too soon. But no, I know why your mind went there, Kevin, and it's because look at the sort of magma baiting of Mitt Romney, a Republican who dared to stand up against a leader that's caused so much fervor and fear and anxiety and anger, and a Republican from his party saying this isn't legal, this isn't good, and having his own voice. It's an equivalence. It's not exactly the same as a metaphor or a simile or whatever you want to call it, an exemplar of, but there is some parity, I think. We live in a time where people are often too scared to stand up to the overwhelming force, which in this case and in what we're going through at the moment is fear. He wasn't driven away from his principles because of that, and for that I think he's very heroic. But yeah,
that's actually a great segue to my next question for you, Tahar. And this has to probably be a big shout out to the script by M.B. Travin, Rory Haynes, and Sarab Nusharvani. I think I saying that correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But what I think the film does so brilliantly, it really, I think, paints the portrait of the world's fear of the unknown, in particular, the Muslim community, because it's just easier to accept that he could have done it, because if you say he's innocent, it dispels this nasty narrative that's been brought in the last few years. Can you talk a little bit about that personal connection and seeing someone now who is so forgiving and is so, in a word, I guess you could say he's happy today, and you feel like you wouldn't be, I wouldn't be, none of us would be in that situation. Can you talk about that personal connection for yourself?
What I'd say is that, how can I answer that? How can I put it? There's obviously a fear around about, and people are making a mistake sometimes by thinking that terrorism is Islam. Of course, it's not. If you want to study it and you read about it, you will understand that it's a mistake. They're terrorists. That's it. They got terrorists, and I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, because there's a few people, and it's a few finally, that are just disturbing the whole thing. So yeah, sometimes it gets me, because I wasn't raised like this, and I know a lot of people that are against this, of course. And but nowadays the problem is mainly that because of that, you are put in a position that you have to explain something to some people that is absolutely obvious for you, So sometimes you can feel like you're defending yourself, and you don't have to, because there's no point finally. But about Mohammed, it's way more than that, because I'm just talking about a human being, not even a Muslim or whatever. Because when I read the script and when I see the movie, what I see is someone who's tortured, and there's no innocent. He is innocent to me, and there's no charge against him, and he could have been anybody else. And that is one of the strengths of the movie. Because yes, of course, it's dealing with 9/11 and what happened because it's true events. But you can take the same story and put it in another atmosphere, and you could have the same feeling at the end of the movie. And that is what Kevin and the script writers managed so well. And finally, what you have to take out of the movie, if there's a lesson, apart from Mohammed and what he is that we better not be controlled by our fears. That is a big problem, I guess, to me.
Awesome. I'll let Jodie Foster please kick off this the answer to this question. What was the most difficult scene to shoot for yourself?
Wow, I don't know. I feel like Tahar got all the difficulties. Shailene and I, we got to watch
at a table,
and it really was. I mean, I think that's
reading all the folders.
The great moment of the movie for me really is to be able to just watch, to be in the room with Tahar and to watch a young actor explore. I say young. Maybe he's not that young,
not anymore.
Younger than me, but to watch somebody find it, to find that place, to find that character, and to be witness to that really it feels like a sacred place. Really, I just thoroughly enjoyed that, and being in Cape Town. So I don't know. The most difficult was probably the time we had a we had a windstorm of the movie. That was probably difficult. I had to try to keep my hat on. That was also very difficult. But I do want to say just from what you guys were talking about, one of the reasons why this film attracted me, of course, Kevin, and the opportunity to work with Tahar and Benedict and Shailene. But, I was around at 9/11. I'm an American, and it's a very singular time in our history. It's a very singular time for us to wake up and to have that much fear, and how you react to fear is a measure of who you are as a people, as a culture, as a person. And it's really the story of, how America reacted to their fear was to create a boogeyman and to fight that boogeyman everywhere that they saw it. And how Mohammed fought fear was to love. That's what got him through all of those years. All of those many, many, many years was his faith and his love. And that's really a testament to Islam. And maybe this is an opportunity for people to understand that, the greatest tenet of Islam is justice, just like the greatest tenet of Christianity is love. And those, that's really what's so beautiful about Mohammed. So that's what I was moved by. And that's, I feel like that inspired the whole experience.
So beautiful. By the way, happy 25th birthday, Jodie Foster. You're not older. We're not gonna bring that to life. Shailene, do you want to answer? What was difficult for you, I guess, in some of those scenes?
I mean, it's a very boring answer, but I'd have to just echo what Jodie said. Working and watching, I don't even want to say working with, just watching Tahar. I mean, we were in a cell, 8x8 cell for days and days and days on end in Cape Town, and it was hot, and there was a lot of elements at play, and some of Tahar's scenes were monologues, these pages and pages and pages of dialogue, and every single time he did one of his scenes, they were completely different and yet just as honest and authentic as the one before it. It was like watching live theater. I've never experienced anything like it. And I just remember after some of the takes, Jodie and I would look at each other and just kind of like, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in because we were witnessing someone not act his way through emotion, but genuinely feel the tides of emotion. And the energy in the room was so dense because of that and so palpable. It was so real that I just, I feel like I constantly just want to say thank you to Tahar because if Mohammed was there a few days to be able to watch, but I think the specific scenes that I'm talking about when he was in the cell and we were going to visit him at Guantanamo is a little bit too hard for Mohammed to sit through and watch. So I don't think he stayed the entire days. But knowing Mohammed now a little bit and knowing you, Tahar, and what you were able to do with his character, I just, the way that you depicted him in this film, I think you did him the greatest honor in the whole world. And it was such an honor to watch it. But to know a man who is genuinely so full of love and forgiveness, this is not BS that we're spitting out there because we believe in this person and, you know, we have an agenda. He walks into a room and the entire room is magnified. The entire room, it changes frequency. I don't know how to explain it other than he's living on a vibration that I feel like we all wish we could be living on. And the way that you portrayed that in this film, Tahar, it's so beautiful. And I'm grateful to have been able to watch it in person in the flesh. So difficult. I mean, I think the most difficult thing was just going, okay, how do I hold space for that in a way that's as honest and as present as what he's offering us in these moments.
Tahar, you're prom king. Look at that. You're amazing.
Oh, come on. Hey, Shailene and Jody, you are the best partners I've ever had. And really, you helped me a lot to reach that point. As you know, it was not easy to portray, but really thank you, because each time I could rely on you, on the way you act, what you are, whether it's when we act or when we were just on set. So thank you so much. Really, we don't do what we do by ourselves. So thank you so much. And hats off.
Benedict, any difficult scene for you?
Oh, Benedict the whole time. How about that?
I was really sick. I think I might have been patient zero.
I remember doing the movie.
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah. It's small fry, but I was incredibly ill for the whole thing. I mean, with every symptom COVID had to throw at me, check. So in all seriousness, yeah, I don't know what it was, but I was pretty sick. And then, I mean, borderline pneumonia for the whole shoot, and I had this. This is so actually to be complaining about this. I feel embarrassed to be going last on this. I don't, you know, I swam with some sharks. I jumped off a cliff or two. I nearly got, none of this happened. I spent hours in a makeup van because I had really long hair, much bigger than this, for a movie I did with Jane Campion shortly after called The Power of the Dog. So she wanted me very grown out. So I had a bull cap on with a marine crew cut. So it was very hot and very uncomfortable. And it took about 2.5 hours, 3 hours to put on every morning. And I was sick. But apart from that, you know, I don't really have much to complain about. It's a great role. I wasn't there for as long as the others, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of working with the casts that I was with, but also with Jodie, and those two fantastically well-written scenes, those sort of standoffs. And I was on the point of throwing up and getting sunstroke, blinded, but at the same time, I was opposite Jodie Foster, so I couldn't have been feeling worse, but happier about it.
It's a real transformation, actually, to watch Benedict. I mean, he looked so different, and he sounded so different. And about halfway through the take, I could just see him start to sweat.
It's horrible. It's horrible because when you wear a skull cap, it's like an alien. It's like the guy in Aliens. I can't remember what the android's called when he gets bleeding. You know, I just got this white wig glue kind of running down my head, going, "This is not authentic. This is certainly not Stuart Couch. It's probably more Trump than Stuart Couch or Giuliani." But yeah, it was slightly distracting. Sorry about that, Jodie. That must have been a very odd thing to have to hold your own against freak sweating glue.
Shout out for best makeup and hairstyling, though. Had no idea that you had a big long hair.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Big, exactly. No, it's a sort of, I don't know why it's a secret. I mean, it's an extraordinary job they did. I mean, their patience and their craft was phenomenal, and in the heat to maintain it all through the day. It's pretty extraordinary, actually. It really was.
I never believed
and it made me look 5 years younger.
Kevin, you were saying?
No, I was just saying I never believed it was going to work. I kept trying to persuade Benedict to cut his hair. I said it's never going to work. You know, how can you put a bowl? You got all it's so much hair. But it was kind of one of those miraculous things. He turned up and he'd had a, you know, looked like
I think we should move on. I think we should move on from my hair and my bald cap. It always gets brought up in conversation. I feel like, oh my God.
You could always CGI'd his hair out and just see how great that would have looked. And it would have been interesting. My last question for you guys, because time is wrapping up here, and I think it's probably one of our more important ones. What do you want audiences to take away from this? What message of peace, love, forgiveness, whatever This movie has so many great, graceful, beautiful notes. But what is the one thing you want audiences to take away, or what is the one thing you took away from this experience of filming it? So either one you can take, and I'll start with Kevin.
Well, it's kind of already been said so beautifully by Shailene and Jodie and Benedict, I think. But the thing that made me want to do this movie was Skyping with Mohammed and realizing that he was such a beautiful person and so funny. I mean, that's something we haven't mentioned, is he's hilariously funny. And he's a huge movie buff. He'll know more about the movies of the early 2000s than you will, Clayton. Because all the guards, when he sort of had confessed, supposedly, the guards were allowed to give him DVDs, and they brought in all the DVDs they were watching, 19, 20-year-old Southern soldiers. Oh. And so he's seen a lot of very odd movies, but he has also got good taste because he's seen The Big Lebowski, I think 86 times.
Oh, yeah. I was about to say, I was like, he's probably seen Super Troopers, and he's just like,
that's why we use the Dylan song at the end, because that's obviously from The Big Lebowski, and that's his. He knows everything about that movie. He loves it. So, but really, yeah, it was him, and I think Jodie said this, that he meets fear with love, but not just love, but with understanding. And in his book, it's one of the amazing things that he's always putting himself in the shoes of the guards. And he's going, I wonder why they're doing that. I wonder what it feels like to torture someone. I wonder why they're so scared and what they think about me. And it's the most amazing feat of empathy. And I think that empathy is something that's in short supply in the world. And he exemplifies it.
Shout out to Jeff Bridges and John Goodman. Shailene Woodley.
Everything that Kevin said. And I think maybe one of the biggest things that I took away from it was assumption. I think one of the things when there's fear, and when fear clouds our ability to, fear is like a chokehold. You feel like you can't breathe because you feel like your mind isn't working straight, and oftentimes you're not able to isolate your own emotions and feelings from that of like the collective or that of society or media. And I think with this movie, through the story of watching these lawyers with Mohammed and watching Couch with Mohammed and his experience of the justice system and his experience of this human being and his fair right to try, all of those things, I think assumption played a big role for me. Not just listening to what people around you are saying, not listening or buying into the stories of fear, but really taking a step back and going, how do I feel about this situation? What do I think about this situation, regardless of the feelings and emotions of those who exist around me? That was a big one for me.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
God, how do I add to those two answers? I suppose to look at fear and anger and try and meet it with love and understanding, to try to somehow, like Shailene says, distance yourself enough to hold that feeling, because like Jodie said, if you lived through that as an American, it's a very just reaction. But then to hold that and say, how does this then manifest in action? How do I then rationalize this overriding emotion that, like Shailene says, can blind you into the worst, most instinctive, and I mean base in the sort of primordial part of your brain reactions. It just literally, we know, scientifically triggers a base behavior, and it takes a superhuman effort. And that's kind of who Mohammed represents. That's who he is. He's got this superhuman ability to investigate the other, to challenge his assumptions and what might be ours, and move from a position that, like you said, at the beginning of this interview, Clayton, that most of us would find it impossible to forgive our torturers, impossible to go towards understanding our captors and our aggressors. And yet, when he does that, he finds the strength and the solace to survive and come out, yes, incredibly damaged, but also a shining example to the rest of us of how best to be human.
Amazing. Tahar Rahim.
I think that's what we said.
Buy a flight ticket, go to Nouakchott in Mauritania and have a cup of tea with 6 spoons of sugar with Mohammed, and then you know. But I'd say what I said before is that to not be controlled by your fears, pick love over hate, pick forgiveness her anger and try to understand someone who doesn't look like you, who's not just like you,
and
was different from you.
And Queen Jodie Foster.
Oh, wouldn't you know, I come at the end, like everybody's already said anything. And yeah, I agree with that. They tried to break him. I mean, I think that was the objective. The objective was to break him and to punish him for being a man of faith. And he answered that with really embracing his humanity, and that saved him. I mean, that's what's so amazing, is that his vulnerability saved him. And I would argue, I mean, he is damaged, and I'm sure nobody would ever want to have lived through what Mohammed lived through, but he is a better man because of it. And that's really surprising that he could go through what he went through and become a better man.
I'd also like to add one final thing, if I may,
please.
Which is that obviously we spent a lot of this time talking about Mohammed for good reason, but you know, the movie is also about Nancy Hollander and Stuart Couch, and you know, in their way, they are heroic. I think both of them would actually, the real people would say, I'm not a hero. You know, Couch actually got quite annoyed with me when I called him brave for what he'd done. He said, you know, somebody who comes back from Vietnam missing a leg, they're brave. I'm not brave. But I think he was brave, and I think Nancy in her day-to-day going up against the might of the American government, often hopelessly, by the way. So she loses like 95% of her cases, and she expects that. And for the last 40 years, she's been losing every case, but keeping going, banging on that door, fighting for people's liberty, for the rule of law, for justice. And I think there's something really heroic in a kind of resilient way about her as well.
Amazing. Mauritanian is a amazing film. I'm so glad that it exists in this time that we're in, and that people will learn about this story. I thank you all so much for joining us today. Kevin Macdonald, Shailene Woodley, Tahar Rahim, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Jodie Foster. You're all my heroes. Thank you so much. And Playing Davis for Variety, thanks for watching today on the Variety Streaming Room.